Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle Haas. God, I love the human cobra. And in this video, you would think that on a comic book YouTube channel like this one right here, I would be making videos, spending time showing you guys awesome comic books like these ones right here. Gotta love Journey into Mystery. What a great run. But in this video, we got to talk about more important things. That's right. Show is over. Class is in session. You guys knew it was coming. We have to update you all on the Bronze and Silver Age Index. No more fun stuff. All charts and graphs from here on out. So in this video, I'm going to give you guys the update on what is going on in the markets. Where are comic book prices? Is everything going to zero? Well, in this video, I'm happy to say that the trend is your friend. At least until it isn't. But before I get into the video, if you guys could drop me a like or a comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, help support this channel, doing those things, I'd appreciate it. But let us get into this video here today. Now, like I said, this is the update to the Bronze and Silver Age Index for the month of December 2022. Can you guys believe it? We went through a whole calendar year of 2022. The market has closed. Here we are onto greener pastures in 2023, or maybe redder pastures. I mean, nobody really knows at this point. But in this video, I got to give you guys the December update. And if you guys remember, I've been saying in these past few monthly videos where I was saying, December is usually the up month for the comic book market. So in this video, we have to figure out if Swaggle Haas's model was actually correct. Do you guys think that I would report to you the truth? Would I swallow my pride and give you guys just the facts of the truth of what the market is doing here in comic books? Of course I would only give you guys the truth. And I will give you guys the truth, even if it's only on a technicality. Now, this is the comic book index. In case you guys don't know how it was put together, here it is in the slide in front of you. I take the top 100 sold books per age of the silver and the bronze. I take the highest volume of grade that moves within that particular book. I count the final sale of the month, the market close. I calculate all the numbers from GPA data, and I get the charts and graphs that I present to you here today. Now, this was our November graph for the Silver Age. And again, my prediction based on models of previous years is that for the Silver Age specifically, the December month is always an up month leading into the next year. Now, why is that the case? We don't really know. Perhaps people buy stuff for tax reasons. Perhaps people buy stuff for Christmas gifts. It was just one of those things that it always ended up being true. Well, here we were in December of 2022. And what did happen to the market index? Was Swaggle Haas right with his model and his prediction? Well, you bet your ass I was right. We were up a whopping $66 on our index this month. That is right. Swaggle Haas was totally right. He called his shot. Babe Ruth out here calling his home run. Yeah, $66. Not a lot this month, guys, but we are technically speaking up on this particular month, which was actually really surprising. Going into calculating the data for this month, I wasn't too sure that we were going to be actually living up to kind of that prediction. I mean, just anecdotally speaking, when I personally had been watching auctions, it felt like a lot of the prices were definitely going down, even more so than that of November. But I was actually surprised to see that basically we traded sideways in these past couple months. Now, maybe that is due to the fact that December is usually an up month. So maybe there was some kind of counteracting factor to the fact that we are still going down in terms of the overall trend. And that actually would have been a worse off month if we were jumping into, say, October or November, and we will see it continuing to go down in January, February, and March. But I will kind of get into those sort of predictions later on in the video. Now, that is the Silver Age, but I'm sure you guys are wondering what happened to the Bronze Age here. Well, the Bronze Age didn't have the same kind of thing happening every single month in December. It was a little bit more inconclusive of what was going to happen. So I wasn't necessarily convinced that the Bronze Age was going to have an up month. Where did we go in the month of December? Well, we continued on our slow and steady decrease, dropping down to 42,000 $879. Not a big drop overall, one of these smaller drops actually in a month-to-month scenario, only at 2%, but still kind of on the decline. And that actually marks the 8th month in a row that the Bronze Age has been going down. I mean, just look at the chart right here. From the height of the market in 2021, we've basically been on the downward slope for the Bronze Age month after month after month. At least the Silver Age had some months where there were some dead cat bounces, but it is really interesting to see where we are going. Obviously, the trend is your friend until it is not, but here is the side-by-side, and I will talk a little bit more about where I think we are going still in these coming months. And one of the things I think is really interesting when I think about these two graphs right here is that for the Bronze Age in particular, the boom is effectively over. When we got to January of 2021, the Bronze Age index was sitting around that $46,000 range. Now here in December, it is down at the $42,000. So basically all of the gains, or the effective gains, that we had felt for the Bronze Age books during the comic book boom of 2021 and 2022 are effectively over. But with that being said, the index is still above that of 2020 prices, and that really remains the big question out there as far as comic book values are concerned. Are we going to get to a point where we actually test those 2020 prices, or maybe even test some of those 2019 prices? Now, the same can't be said for the Silver Age, where the Silver Age index here in the month of December is still above that of its boom, initial boom in the January of 2021, where it was at $46,000. So the boom phase for the Silver Age hasn't yet been completely eliminated, but I don't necessarily think that we aren't going to test that theory in the coming months or so. The real question remains, are we going to test those 2020 prices? Now let's talk about some of the kind of monthly updates here. From November to December, we went from 49,574 to 49,640. So definitely, like I predicted, it was going to be an up month for December, so much so that it went up by 0.002%. There's no margin of error on that one. Clearly, it went up a whopping 0.002%. But the good news for that is that the previous month, we had our big capitulation. The big correction happened last month where we actually went down 11%. 11% was one of the biggest single month-to-month drop-offs for any particular month that we've had in these last 2 calendar years or so. So it is really interesting to see that and to think about, like, okay, has the damage been done? I mean, at least as far as those big giant drops are concerned, certainly we can continue to slide down in any given month. I think we're actually going to test some of those low ends of the trend line, but has the real damage been done? Have we hit that despair point yet? I'm not really sure, but let me know what you guys think in the comments. Now, for the Bronze Age, you can see that we went month to month 43,887 to this month of 42,879, a decrease of 2%. But again, that's a lot less than what we saw last month, where we did have a decrease of 14%. So, in my personal opinion, obviously we are still going down. Anything can happen. We can continue to go down, another 80% or whatever the case is. We can definitely go to zero, but it does feel like the big drop off has happened. And outside, more of a sort of macroeconomic factors, which definitely are still on the table. We can definitely get lots of unemployment. We can have, a bigger recession to come this year that can have those sort of macro effects on the comic book market. But, if the comic book market doesn't necessarily feel kind of those macro effects, do we think that we'll be able to kind of hold this floor level overall? Now let's jump into some of the key takeaways. And I think this is really still an important thing to point out to you guys of what I think is happening, or at least this is what I think the story being told when I look at some of the data for the Silver and Bronze Age. So for the Silver book values, 16% of the index was down this month, where 14% was up, which to me sort of shows a return to normal. I mean, I suspect that about the same number of books will go up and down in any given month, and the down number is a lot less than what it was last month, and the up number is actually up this month. So, kind of shows that that big capitulation from last month has been kind of evened out. Now, the big takeaway here is that 28% of books actually had non-sales, which means there was no sale in this particular month. And if 28% of those books have non-sales, that can definitely swing the value of the index significantly so. I mean, last month we had about 19% no sale. Now we're up to 28% no sale, which suggests to me a few different things. Either one, buyers are just hesitant to make those purchases on those books. They're looking at those prices and thinking to themselves, yeah, it's still not low enough. I'm unwilling to make that purchase. or dealers have yet to sort of capitulate down to the prices that buyers feel comfortable with. They still have it marked up 20%, marked up 25% or whatever, and they're unwilling to kind of come down on their prices, and they're just sort of hoping that they can kind of weather the storm until buyers get desperate again and want to buy back in. So the non-sale thing, I think, is a really interesting thing to take a look at. And as soon as some of those prices, get met between buyers and sellers, we're going to see, that non-sale number go down, and effectively that's going to increase the value range of the index. So we might start to see things trend back up. So, if we're losing index value based on percentage down from month to month of the values of books, that's one thing. But if we're losing value based on non-sales, that means something completely different. Now, for the Bronze Age, it is a similar situation where 17% are down, that is less than what it was last month, and then 18% are up, that's more than it was last month, and then 11% non-sale, that is up from last month as well. So again, the Bronze Age had some books that did not sell, and that affected the value of the index. Now, let me quickly jump to the month-by-month scenario. This is what I was talking about with the trend of the December sales, where typically speaking in previous years, December has always been an up month for specifically the Silver Age. Well, technically speaking, we did have that up month, although effectively we went side to side. So kind of an interesting thing to look at. And I am very curious of where we are now going to go in January. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to some of the comic book sales, even in this last handful of days or so, but this last Heritage auction that happened in the first week of January actually had some really strong sales overall. So I feel like we're already starting to slowly trend back up here in January, which is surprising to me. We'll have to look at the data when we get to the end of the month, but that is a little bit surprising. So here we are kind of in the two trend lines here. Now, again, this is not necessarily drawn to scale. This is me just sort of doing Pictionary for you guys, but it is something that is kind of satisfying to look at. And as you can see, I think both indexes are kind of hovering around the lower side of the trend line. I think technically speaking, this graph should be showing the silver index being below that of the middle trend line if it was actually drawn to proper scale. But it will be interesting to see kind of where we go. Will we be testing the bottom side of that trend line? I think that is very possible. You can see in previous months, especially when we were in 2020, when we had the initial crash of the start of COVID, you can see that in the Bronze Age, specifically in that situation, it was testing more of that low side of the trend line. So I would imagine if we continue to go into a recession for the next, 4 to 5 months or 6 months or whatever the case is, that will definitely be testing those trend lines. And maybe if things are all correlated with comic books to the stock market, to the money printing, as soon as the Fed makes the pivot in Q3 or Q4, if that in fact is actually what Jerome Powell is deciding to do, that could definitely be the turning point for the comic book market. But since we are at the end of 2022, let us talk about the highs to lows for some of the things, some of the assets out there in the market. This is something that's kind of fun to talk about. From the high point of 2022 to the low point of where we finished, how did all of these things do? Well, as you can see right there from your graph, the Silver Age books have been down 45% from the high of 2022, which is surprising because the Bronze Age has only fallen 38% from the high this year. And one of the reasons for that is that you can see the small number I have after that, which is 47. The Bronze Age actually fell 47% from the high of 2021. If you were going to factor in the Silver Age high of 2021, the number would basically be the same at 45 to 46%. It's just that the Silver Age had a huge spike back up this year, where the Bronze Age has not had that similar spike back up in this particular calendar year. Well, the 45% metric in comparison to the S&P 500 is definitely a lot worse, because the S&P has been down 20% for this particular calendar year. A lot of people like Michael Burry are kind of predicting that massive stock market crash, maybe dropping down another 30, 40% or whatever the case is. So that would maybe be down to 50%. The question, sort of remains, is there going to be a correlation? If the stock market crashes, is that going to affect the values of comic books? I suppose it definitely could. People are invested in all different sort of ways. And if you all of a sudden lose equity in one part of your life, you might have to kind of liquidate other parts as well. And that could affect comic book values. Or do we think that comic books are kind of forward looking and we've already hit that sort of 45% correction and we're kind of going to trade sideways from here on out. The last one that's kind of interesting to talk about is the Bitcoin one. 65% down from the high this year, 74% down from the 2021 high. And that one is kind of interesting because, we've talked about the correlation between the Bitcoin charts to the silver and Bronze Age index charts that I showed you guys last month. Well, the last little thing I wanted to talk about was pull up this chart right here. And I had wanted to do a video specifically on this by itself, but I felt like it would be worth talking about in our index video here today. And this is sort of the emotional journey of the investor. And I think that this is really interesting because it definitely mirrors kind of what we've seen with the silver and Bronze Age indexes. Now, this is kind of usually what happens with bull market to bear market runs, where you kind of start off in the stealth phase. People are thinking, hey, comic books, that could be a really cool, thing to invest in. Those things start to get exciting. Things start to take off a little bit. And then, as things start to take off, people get more and more aware about it. And then they start to sell off and take some of those gains. That's initially called the bear trap right there, because we still have yet to go to the moon. Then all of a sudden you hit the mania phase. This is that 2021 comic book market boom. You go through it, media attention, enthusiasm. YouTube channels are talking about comic books blowing up. News organizations are talking about comic books blowing up. You get to greed, you get to delusional phase, you get to the new paradigm. We're going to the moon, boys. We're going to live forever. And then you get to the bull trap, which is the diamond hands meme phase. Then you sort of get this return to normal where you kind of get that dead cat bounce. And then all of a sudden you start to capitulate all the way back down to where I would say we kind of are today. I mean, the question is, have we really hit the despair phase? But once we get to that point, that usually equals kind of a return to the mean. And then when you kind of take a step back and you look at, sort of where the journey started and where the journey ended, you realize that you've effectively still been kind of hovering around this trend line, and you are still higher, in the present than you were in the past. So it's kind of interesting to think about that, the emotional journey of comic books, how much it mirrors kind of the index that I've put together for you guys. And, it'll be interesting to see like how much of a despair we are going to hit in 2023. Well, that is all for this video. That was me going over the Silver Age Index for you guys for the month of December 2022. Let me know what you guys think. Where do you guys see comic books in these next few months or so? I definitely think we could test a few of those lower levels. The question is are comic books forward looking in any sort of way? A lot of people talk about, in depressions, one of the things, or one of the interesting stats that I always like to kind of point at is the fact that movies, entertainment, and other sort of media forms always do very, very well in tough economic times. I know it's easy to kind of throw around that idea of, when people don't have disposable income, they're not going to be able to buy comic books. But it actually ends up being kind of, opposite in a lot of ways. When people are sort of depressed, they still want to buy things. They still need some kind of entertainment. They still need a little bit of joy or hope in their life. And so a lot of these kind of media and entertainment fields actually tend to perform pretty well in these markets. And one of the conversations I had with one of the dealers in my last dealer video was actually talking about that, where comic book collectors are, they're pretty hardcore. They like to weather these recession storms. They like to buy their comic books still. So kind of an interesting thing to think about. I mean, obviously, if we all go to zero, if the world goes to zero, then nothing is recession proof. So really, really hard to know where we will be, in the next few months or so due to kind of the global economic factors. Anyways, that's all for this video. Let me know what you guys think. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I'll see you in the next one.